Hi everybody. So today I've got something new for you. I've finally decided to start doing some painting videos. So this video is actually going to show you how to paint that red color that I do on all my Eldar vehicles. I know a lot of people have been sending me messages, even asking on the videos, how do I get the red? And yeah, I have mentioned on a few of the videos, kind of a quick mention on how I do it. But of course, it's a lot easier to see it done rather than just hear the ingredients. The same way that it's a lot easier to see someone cook, a meal rather than just tell them what ingredients to put in it. So I'm hoping that this video will give you some inspiration to perhaps, use some of the techniques that I use here to maybe paint your own vehicles the same way or a similar way, or take whatever methods you can out of it. What I've got here today is a Forgeworld Wave Serpent. This is my new pride and joy. He will hopefully become a staple of most of my armies here. Okay, so to prime my models for that Saim-Hann red, I use a red primer. Really basic primer that I bought. I mean, I know you can buy these gaming primers sold by gaming specific companies, so I'm sure those would work fine too. But if you want to use some sort of gaming specific primer, go right ahead, because those are usually higher quality than these ones. I find this one is fine as long as you don't overspray. As long as you're careful not to spray too much, you're okay. It does have a tendency, if you do overspray, to clump up, so you might, if you make a mistake, then you might have to kind of really quickly maybe just sweep some off with your hand or something. But otherwise it works beautifully for me. I don't mind it. It's fine enough. So, be lazy, prime red just to make things easier. It seems to help with the overall color to create that kind of depth that I'm looking for. Alright, so we're back, and I have primed the Wave Serpent body as well as the actual turrets that I've done for this Forgeworld Wave Serpent. And we're going to start with the first layer of paint. So this is going to be a pretty easy and quick one. What you're going to do is you're going to use blood red, and you are just going to water it down. So we're going to take a bunch of it here. Let's see, let's dig out a little bit. Is there somewhere running out of this paint here? But here we go. We're going to throw down a bunch. And I like to, how there's like stuff on the end of the brush there. It's getting kind of mushy. I'm going to just wipe that off, just for my own sanity, so it doesn't get into weird places. And we're going to take a good dollop of water there and wet it all down. And you want it to be pretty watery. I'm going to test out a little bit here. That's a little bit not watery enough. I'm going to get a little bit more water here. The reason you're doing this step is, or that you want to get it watered down, is you don't want it to be perfectly smooth when you do it on the model. Here, I'm going to do this one-handed. Normally I'd be doing this two-handed, but I'm holding the camera. And you don't want it to be perfectly smooth. You want it to be a little bit uneven. You want it to actually be a little bit beaten up looking when you put this layer of paint on. It'll help out in the overall look once you're done to make it actually look a little bit more natural. So, just grab that and just start doing this sort of wet, watered down layer of blood red on the vehicle. Okay, so I'm going to go and do this, and we'll be back in a sec. You just continue kind of doing this watered down blood red on the vehicle, except that I'm going to do this with two hands now, so back in a second. We're going to move on to the first layer of dry brushing. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a dark orange dry brush on kind of the raised surfaces, the side surfaces, and a little bit over just the whole model. I'm going to show you how I do that. In fact, I've got this technique that I like to call sloppy dry brushing. And why is it sloppy? Because I don't remove, so much of the paint off the brush when I start dry brushing. I definitely don't put any water on it. That's the key, is no water on the paint. However, you don't want it to be, clumping on the model. You'll see what I mean in a second when we start. So let me just get the camera in here. Okay. So I've got dark orange. This might be a challenge just because I'm trying to hold the camera and do this at the same time. Let's see if it works. So I've got one of these here, and I'm going to I've got some paint here. I'm going to take a chunk of it out, dab it down, get it off most of the brush. I'm going to actually remove a good chunk of it off the brush there, but not too much off the top. And we're going to start. It's just go for a sloppy dry brush. Here we go. Start on kind of the edges. Those are the most important. Let's see if I can get better lighting there for you. Okay, so, and then a little bit over the whole thing. I want the whole thing to get a little bit of it, but most importantly, you want to create kind of a highlight by going around the edge there. Okay, moving on to actually, doing a little bit of the body on here. I'm going to try to move it closer so you guys can see what's going on. Give me a little more paint there. And the sloppy dry brush continues. I'm creating that edge, so we're running out of paint here. I'm going to get a little bit more. And, again, notice that there's no water being done. This is straight up just the paint. In fact, this particular tub I have here is pretty dehydrated, so it's actually even stiffer than it might be. To get this full effect, you might need to just leave your, put some paint down and leave it for a few minutes just to get it to start dehydrating. There's a little bit too much of a clump. I'm just removing that with my finger, and on we go. So I'm creating this dark orange, kind of like a highlight around. Just to give you a final sense, I'm trying to come closer here, show you what it looks like there. And you're just going to continue to kind of do that sloppy dry brush on the edges, and eventually do kind of the middle area too. Because what this is doing, this is creating essentially a kind of grain look. You're creating this kind of grain look with all this sloppy kind of light coloration. Oh, let me clean that up a little bit. And this grain is going to look really great once you kind of finish the whole thing and do the final steps. So go off and do that, and I'll be back in a sec once this is all done. Okay, just going to show you kind of what the completed first dry brush looks like, so you can get a nice up-close look at it. Give an example. So you can see this sort of sloppy dry brush technique. I've kind of created lines on the vehicle, but also done a little bit of scratching away with the brush there in the sort of middle main areas. So as you can see, it's sort of already starting to create this kind of grain effect. As you can see, I've kind of done a little bit there, over here. I hope you can kind of get that across. This is a good example here. So I've kind of dry brushed the grain into there. And I've done the same thing for all the, all the turrets. If you get close, you can see that effect is still maintained. Okay, now that we've done the first sort of highlight layer of dark orange, we're going to do a lighter orange now to get the grain going even deeper on this vehicle here. So, what am I using? You saw me use, blazing orange originally. That was a dark orange, and then you want to use a light orange. I mean, I have this Privateer Press paint here because I also play, War Machine Hordes. It's pretty similar tone. It's a little bit lighter, if you can see there, slightly lighter. You can use GW paints. I mean, you don't have to use the paints I use, but I've got this particular one. You want to go a light orange of some kind, and we're going to do the same type of method where we do kind of a sloppy dry brush on the edges and afterwards down the middle of the whole thing. So I'm going to show you how that's going to work here. Let me grab this here, get some paint rolling. Okay, pop it out, and down it goes. I'm going to wipe off a tiny bit here just for the start so I don't have any clumps on it, but later on we're not going to go too thin. And you just want to get started. Give it a shot. So go kind of down the sides. Now when you do this one, you want to do it not as deep. Oops, I kind of went a little bit too deep there, but you want to go not as deep as necessarily as the previous layer. You want to have a little bit of that remaining. So when you do the edges, don't go as deep on that edge. Leave a little bit left over there. If you kind of mess up a little bit, you can kind of just go sideways to kind of clean it up. And don't get too worried about being exact. I mean, what you're really doing is it's kind of an inexact science in itself. You're just creating this sort of illusion. Okay, so just continue on with doing these highlights. Do the edges first, and then once paint starts to come off your brush, that's when you do the inner areas. When there's less paint, because you don't want the inner areas to be too clumped. You want to create this sort of nice effect there. So, you'll notice that as I dab down to get some paint, I start doing these, side areas that actually need more paint. There we go. Yet, when I finally start running out of paint on the brush, that's when I do these, inner areas around here. So it doesn't sort of clump as much. So you're going to be maintaining that sort of strong highlight on the edges of the vehicle. All right, go ahead and do that, and we'll be back in a sec. Alright, so when you're done that second layer, that layer of light orange dry brushing, it should look something like this. So I'm going to zoom in real close here, hopefully so you can get a good view. And you'll notice how I've left the lower layer showing, and I've kind of done it just on the further edge. Pretty basic technique for layering, but you're layering this sort of sloppy dry brush, essentially, is what you're doing across the whole vehicle. And you'll notice that I have gone in the kind of regular places, and I've sort of extended that kind of sloppy dry brushing into the middle sort of flat areas of the vehicle as well, although I've done it very heavily along the edges because I want to sort of highlight those edges. And you know, this may look horrifying and ugly right now, but I promise you it will look great once we do the next step. And the next step is the big secret step that really kind of turns this all into a cool looking vehicle, or at least, you know, the red part of it, because of course there's still a long way to go before it's done. But just a good look here at what it looks like, what it should look like when you're done with it. We've created this sort of false grain kind of illusion on the vehicle using these kinds of sloppy dry brushing techniques. I've tried to use raised surfaces, you know, I've kind of done a line down here, kind of a line down there, you know, the edges. I've done this sort of the circle around this thing just to make it sort of, you know, try to give it some lines. And of course I've done the same for all the turret parts here, as you can see. I've done the same kind of highlighting. Okay, so back in a second with the next step. Okay, so now we move into the really big step. So now that we've got this whole kind of highlighted, dry brushed, gunked up kind of looking vehicle, we're going to use the secret ingredient which really gives it that nice red sheen. And that secret ingredient is, my friends, old GW red ink. So that's the sort of secret to getting this look. You know, I've tried other inks. They don't quite really match the look of it. Although, you know, you can get it to be pretty close. And in fact, I'm going to do a little experiment today where the bottom of the tank, which I have also dry brushed up. You can see that I actually still dry brushed it up. I'm going to do the bottom of the tank using privateer red ink. So that way both you and I will be able to compare the exact look of the red inks that work, simply because GW red ink is no longer sold. This is my last ink tub that I have. I found about 3 or 4 of these at a game store once, and you know, they don't produce them anymore, although I've heard there's online producers. Alright, so let's put the ink on the model. A really basic job that you're going to do is you're just going to nicely try to get it on top. You're going to try to make it as even as possible. Try not to clump it up too much. If you see it clumping up, move your brush and kind of, you know, sweep some of it away, and you know, just give it a good coat on top. So we're going to take a look at getting that done. Okay, so I'm going to take some of this stuff here. I got my red ink ready to go. Take a little bit on the brush, not too much, and I'm just going to get started and make it go smoothly over the whole model. You know, be generous with it, but without clumping it up too much. And you're going to be able to see that kind of nice red sheen take shape as you do it. Especially those places where you've dry brushed nicely, so it'll create kind of this effect of a grain on the model. Alright, so let's do a quick close-up so you can kind of see what the effect is like here. Let me zoom in there. And yeah, you can sort of see it starting to kind of really take shape. There we go. And just do that on the entire vehicle. And that will be the red step for the whole vehicle. So I'll be back in a second once I've done it all here. Alright, so I'm back here with the inked model. So we're going to take a look at what this looks like so you can get a sense of what yours should be looking like if you're following the same steps. And you've got that great red going, and yet if you see those highlights that are underneath the red ink. That was all that meticulous dry brushing that we did before in order to kind of create depth and kind of grain on the model. And you know, you can just see that kind of highlighting take shape. And you know, this is basically how I do my red for my Eldar. Now the bottom I've done in the privateer red ink, so you can take a look at that. My first reaction is that it's similar but not quite as deep red as the GW red ink. The GW ink just has a great sheen to it, has a great luster, you know? I don't know, I mean, maybe, you know, it's hard to really tell, but, you know, in person, I prefer the GW, I gotta say. Okay, so, you know, moving on, I'm going to speed up this video a little bit. You know, I don't want it to be super long. And besides, you know, the last few steps now are just sort of basic. You know, first I'm going to do some black. So, basically, what are you going to do? You're going to paint, you're going to take Chaos Black, you're going to paint, for instance, this inner area here. You're going to paint this thing back here black. You're going to do, I like to do his visor black. I like to do this little arm part of it. I like to do black. You know, anything that, you're just doing highlights. I have this weird thing where I do half the engine side black, you know, things like that. So this is to give it some contrast and to give it a nice kind of a base to really contrast the colors off of it. Okay, so I've got the black done, just to give you a sense of which parts I do black here. We've got these little sort of vents I've done black, I've done the back vent here, I've done part of the engines, I've done little bits and pieces on the guns, on the driver there. This is all stuff I've done little black highlights everywhere. As well as the turrets, so you can see what's black, you know, gun bits and things. I mean, you're going to do that however you want to. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do white. And the way I do white may be kind of shocking to you, but I don't do any kind of undercoat. I don't do any kind of like light brown. I know some people do, or yellow or whatever. With my vehicles, I just go straight white, you know, heavy, unwatered down. The first layer is just a thick layer of white right on the vehicle. I'm going to show you how I'm doing that. And after you've done that first layer, you might want to do a few watered down layers on top. I mean, white is not easy. You've got to keep doing layers over it. But eventually you'll get there. It shouldn't take you too long if you do a nice thick layer at the start. So let's start that now. We got skull white here. Okay, gonna get that going. Just take a little bit to start for you guys here so you can see what's going on. And just to give you an example, straight white, no undercoat, right on the vehicle. Alright. There we go. So, you know, I'm just starting off with a straight white undercoat. It'll probably take 2 or 3 of these. So, you know, don't be discouraged. Keep going. You'll get there. All right, back when I am finished with the white on the vehicle. Okay, so we're back. And as you can see, I have gone and done the white on the vehicle. Hopefully you have been doing something similar. You know, how many coats is this? I'd say about 3 average in some places. In some places maybe only like 1 and a bit, but in other ones, you know, took 3 on some of the bigger surfaces. Zoom in really close just so you can see. See if it'll, yeah, there you go. Now it's not perfectly smooth. That's okay because if, you know, once you're done at the end, you can do more coats to really smooth it out if you want. You see, it's not quite perfectly smooth. In those places, like a place like this, I'll probably do a bunch more coats afterwards just to smooth it out. In other places, though, it's already pretty smooth. Like down here, for instance, let's see if I can get to zoom in. Down here, I'd probably leave it the way it is. You know, the idea is, I mean, I don't know how you paint. I mean, I can't paint in such a way that I'm perfect the whole way, or else I think my head would explode. So now something else is like you'll notice little tiny mistakes here and there. For instance, like over here, little mistake there, a little bit of a mistake over here. That's okay. I mean, you know, you can make little tiny mistakes because you can go and clean them up later on. Like, you know, down here, it's going to be pretty easy to clean. Over here, I'm just going to do a tiny little bit of red, and that's going to clean it up. So don't worry too much. Now, the next step, this is my favorite step. This is the step that ties everything beautifully together, and that is Devlan Mud. And we're going to take the Devlan Mud, and we're going to put it inside all these little recesses. Every single little recessed area on the vehicle is going to have it inside. So let's just show you a little bit of that. Okay, so we got that. Whoa, it's really locked in there. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to take a little bit here just to show you. And in we go. Hopefully you can see there. It's going to go right in there. Nice and gentle. Very thick. Don't water the Devlan Mud down at all. Just go right into it. Gives you an example of what it looks like right there. Here's an example of what it looks like when it hits the white. That's what it looks like when it hits the white. Pretty cool, eh? That's really kind of what we're doing here. You're creating this great shading effect on the vehicle, and it really is going to tie everything together nicely. So I'll be back in a bit once I've done all of that. Okay, so here it is. Devlan Mud is down on the model, and we're going to zoom in so you can actually see how every little nook and cranny, every little recessed line has Devlan Mud in it, and I think it's quite amazing how such a simple step, I mean this took maybe 15 minutes last night, how such a simple step can really tie a model together. And there you go, so that's what it kind of looks like with the Devlan Mud everywhere. I'm going to speed things up now. I'm going to do some details, I'm going to do gems, going to do a little bit of blue bits, I'm going to do the inside of his cockpit, and I'm actually also going to paint the cockpit itself. I'll probably show you guys how to do that. But onwards to finishing this model. Oh, and of course, that's what these guys look like with the Devlan Mud inside the recesses as well. Okay. Okay, so we're getting very close to the end here. I've done all the gems on the vehicle. I did these ones, I decided to do them blue just to add some contrast, and it is a Forgeworld vehicle, it's a little bit different looking. And otherwise my green gems are done the standard kind of lazy style I do. I'm going to show you how lazy this is actually. It's literally just a bunch of layers like that. These ones are slightly less lazy. They're kind of that sort of standard gem style. I kind of like the cartoony look of that style for these vehicles because they are supposed to look weird and alien. What have I done? I've painted his hair, I've painted his visor, painted his skin, put some little stuff on the cockpit there so you can actually see that he's got some little doodads kind of working away. Pretty basic, simple stuff. And the last thing you're going to do is the cockpit. The only thing I'm going to show you that you need to know is how do I prime a cockpit? How do you prime a cockpit? Without kind of having the whole thing just go bad. Well, what I use is a Sharpie, a permanent marker. Pretty basic. See, Sharpie, permanent marker, fine point. I'm going to show you how I do it. Literally, just take it and do the raised surfaces that you're going to be painting. Make it nice and black, and literally that is going to be your, let me get some focusing going here. That's going to be how you prime this to put paint on it. And of course you're going to paint it normally using kind of maybe an old brush that's already been curled away so that you can just sort of hit the surface with it. But yeah, there you go. Okay, so back when everything is finished. Alright, here we are, finished and ready to go. It's done. So that's what it looks like. You look inside, the cockpit is all painted up. I've done the guy inside. The gems are ready to go. The white's been done. I touched up little bits of white and red everywhere. There's always little mistakes you can fix up, so that's what I did. And there are the turrets as well. Turrets are rocking and ready to roll. So, with the magnets, I'm on and ready to swap them out. I also sealed the vehicle before putting the cockpit on. So I hope you enjoyed this painting video. I hope it gave you some ideas of potentially how you can do a few techniques for painting red. And just I hope you enjoyed it in general. Thank you so much, and keep watching.